crazy. Get out of my head.
I care louder the most out of everybody.
Echoes call from hollow halls, a voice that creeps and softly crawls. Time stands still, the air is.
On December 27th, 2019, what began as a peaceful holiday morning in Pflugerville, Texas, spiraled into one of the most chilling family tragedies investigators had ever seen. That day, 25-year-old Michael Aguac, a former college football player, known for his gentle spirit and deep faith, arrived at his sister Jennifer's home to celebrate Christmas. But as the hours passed, something inside him seemed to fracture. His calm demeanor gave way to paranoia, prayers, and strange talk about spirits and redemption. And, as haunting as this story was, it was just one of many moments that left the jaw dropping to its core. On the night of November 21st, 2023, a quiet neighborhood in Solon, Ohio, became the scene of a devastating tragedy that left an entire family shattered. Inside the Gulia home, what started as an ordinary evening quickly turned into a horrific event no one could have imagined. Earlier that evening, Theodore Gulia was seated at his desk, working as he usually did. The house was calm, with only his son, RJ, home with him. But in a sudden and unthinkable moment, that peace was broken. Without warning, Theodore was struck from behind with a baseball bat. The blow was so severe, it knocked him to the floor, leaving him dazed and unable to defend himself. As he struggled to make sense of what had just happened, more strikes followed. Moments later, the attack escalated even further, ending in an act of unimaginable violence. By the next morning, Theodore's wife returned home, completely unaware of what had taken place while she was away. The moment she stepped inside, she sensed something was terribly wrong. The stillness of the house was haunting. Then she saw it, her husband, lying motionless. In shock and disbelief, she called the police, her voice trembling as she reported what she had found. When officers arrived, they were met with a heart-wrenching scene. The home was covered in evidence of a violent struggle. Blood was splattered across the hallway and floor, and Theodore's body lay lifeless, showing clear signs of multiple injuries. From the moment they stepped inside, officers knew this was no ordinary case. Something about it felt deeply personal. As they began their investigation, the family members were quickly questioned. RJ and his brother Ben were both visibly shaken, but their reactions couldn't have been more different. Ben appeared devastated, barely able to hold back tears. RJ, however, remained surprisingly calm. When asked what had happened, RJ claimed he had heard noises in the night and believed someone had broken into the house. He insisted that he had nothing to do with his father's death, but his story raised more questions than answers.
He wasn't attacking me. I did not murder my dad.
Detectives quickly noticed inconsistencies in his account. The body had clearly been moved, yet RJ denied touching it. He also couldn't explain why there were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the home. His calm demeanor, combined with his unclear timeline, only deepened the officers' suspicions. Meanwhile, Ben quietly hinted that he believed his brother was responsible. As the investigation unfolded, police spoke with the family's mother, Annie, who explained that she had spent the previous night at her daughter's home. According to her, RJ had called her that morning asking for cigarettes, but he didn't mention anything about his father being hurt.
I said, "Why'd you come home?" "Well, RJ called me, said he needed cigarettes."
Yeah.
I said, "Did he say anything happened?" "No."
It wasn't until she came home that she made the horrifying discovery. With each new piece of information, the officers' focus turned increasingly toward RJ. Their suspicions grew stronger when they realized this wasn't the first time they had been called to the Gulia home. Just 2 weeks earlier, police had responded to reports that RJ had been acting aggressively and making threats toward his family. One officer even recalled a chilling moment during that visit, when Theodore had expressed fear that his own son might one day harm him. Given the pattern of past behavior and the evidence inside the house, officers arrested RJ on suspicion of murder. He was taken to the Solon Police Department for questioning. During the interview, detectives approached him calmly, giving him an opportunity to explain himself. At first, RJ was quiet, but eventually his composure began to break. He took a deep breath and decided to tell the truth.
I cared about her the most out of everybody. I just want you to know that.
He admitted that on that night, something in him snapped. He said he didn't know why or how, but he had been overwhelmed by anger. His father had been sitting at his desk when he approached him from behind and struck him. Arj described feeling immediate regret, saying that he didn't want his father to suffer. He claimed he acted again, not out of hate, but out of panic. Through tears, RJ explained that his father's last words were expressions of love, something that haunted him deeply. He said, "I love you, man," RJ recalled. Visibly emotional, he told detectives that, at that moment, he realized what he had done but felt it was too late to turn back. The officers listened quietly as he spoke, their faces reflecting both shock and sadness. RJ admitted that there had been tension between him and his father for a long time, but he insisted that he still loved him deeply. He said he didn't know what overcame him that night, and that it felt like something inside his mind had gone terribly wrong. Despite the horror of his actions, his confession came with a sense of remorse that the investigators could feel. The detectives thanked him for coming clean, reminding him that honesty was the only way to begin making amends. Although it could never undo what had happened, telling the truth was, at least, a step toward accountability. In the end, RJ pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, felonious assault, and other related charges. The court sentenced him to a maximum of 25 years in prison at the Lorraine Correctional Institution. It was a tragic conclusion to a heartbreaking story, one that left an entire community stunned and a family forever broken. A son who claimed to love his father the most had become the cause of his death, leaving behind only grief, regret, and unanswered questions about how something so terrible could happen inside a family home. Before we go any further, I just want to ask you for a small favor. If you're enjoying the video so far, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. We recently hit 100,000 subscribers, and that's all thanks to you. Our 100K special surprise was revealed, and we had many positive responses from you. Our next goal is to hit 200K before the year ends. It feels impossible, but hey, it's free to dream, right? Also, there's a hidden word somewhere in this video for you. Let's see if you can find it. Now, back to the video. On the 31st of July 2022, a quiet Sunday morning in Sydney, Ohio, turned into a nightmare for the Ducro family. 22-year-old Allison Ducro and her mother, Stacy, had just returned home from breakfast when an unfamiliar vehicle pulled into their driveway. Through the doorbell camera, Allison recognized the driver immediately. It was her former boyfriend, 22-year-old James Rail. What began as confusion and unease would soon escalate into a tragic confrontation that left the family traumatized. At first, James stood silently on the porch, knocking and waiting for someone to answer. Stacy's voice could be heard through the Ring camera, pleading with him to leave. "James, she doesn't want to talk to you," she said. But he didn't respond. After standing there for a few minutes, he stepped away from the door, and for a moment, it seemed like the tense encounter was over. Unfortunately, it was only the beginning. Moments later, the camera picked up movement again. James had circled around the house and returned to the front door. Inside, Allison grew frightened. Her voice trembled as she told her mother that he was back. She immediately dialed 911, explaining that a man was on their porch, refusing to leave, and that she recognized him as her ex-boyfriend. The dispatcher asked her to stay calm and describe the situation, but panic set in as Allison noticed James reaching for the door handle. "He's trying to open the door," she cried into the phone. "He won't leave." On the other end, the dispatcher tried to reassure her, but the situation was escalating too quickly. In the background, Stacy could be heard warning James again to get off their porch. Then came the sound no one wanted to hear, a sudden noise. Followed by 3 gunshots. The doorbell camera caught the moment James stumbled backward and collapsed near the family's car in the driveway. His feet were the only thing visible on the screen, as the house fell into silence, except for the distant sound of crying. Inside, the Ducros were in shock. Allison stayed on the line with the dispatcher, her voice breaking as she explained what had just happened. "He broke through the door, and my dad shot him," she said. On the other end, the dispatcher tried to keep her talking while sending officers to the scene. A neighbor named Jeff, who heard the commotion, rushed over to check on them. He called out to make sure everyone was safe. When he saw James lying motionless on the ground, he tried to reassure the family that he wasn't armed. "He doesn't have a weapon," Jeff said. "Just stay calm." But it was already clear that the situation had ended in tragedy. Police officers from the Sydney Police Department arrived moments later, finding Jeff waiting on the front lawn. He pointed toward the house and explained that the homeowner had fired in self-defense after someone tried to break in. The officers carefully approached, asking where the gun was and ensuring that no further threat remained. Inside, they found Mitch Ducrot, Allison's father, visibly shaken and struggling to process what had happened. When asked if he was all right, Mitch admitted that his heart was racing. He told the officers he had taken his medication for his condition, but missed his dose that morning. Despite his distress, he cooperated fully, allowing investigators to document the scene. The officers soon confirmed that 3 shots had been fired. Outside, they attempted to revive James using an automated defibrillator, but it was too late. A neighbor mentioned that he had seen James take his last few breaths minutes before the police arrived. As investigators worked, Allison sat trembling inside the house. She told officers she had a heart condition and was feeling chest pains. Paramedics checked her and her father, ensuring they were both stable. The emotional weight of what had just unfolded was overwhelming. Later that afternoon, Allison and her parents gave formal statements at the police station. Through tears, Allison recounted the history between her and James. They had dated on and off during high school, and for a short while after graduation. Around 11 that night, James had left her a voicemail. His voice was calm, but unsettling. He said he wanted to reconnect, to talk, and to hear how she was doing. "Please call me back," he said softly before hanging up. Allison never responded, believing it was best to keep her distance. She couldn't have known that within hours, he would show up at her door. During his own statement, Mitch explained what led him to act. He said that as James began forcing the door open, he saw the frame splintering and the glass shaking. Realizing that the intruder was about to break in, he fired through the window section of the door. His intention, he said, was to protect his daughter and wife from harm. Officers later confirmed that the door had indeed been forced with significant strength, and that one of the screws in the frame had been torn loose. James was hit once, in the shoulder, and collapsed shortly after. As the investigation continued, officers learned from Allison that James had experimented with hallucinogenic substances in the past, though it was unclear if he had taken anything that day. Despite the chaos, investigators noted that the family had cooperated fully and appeared deeply traumatized by what had occurred. In the following weeks, the case was reviewed by a grand jury. After examining the evidence, including ring camera footage and 911 recordings, they determined that Mitch Ducrot acted in self-defense and chose not to file any charges against him. The events of that July morning left a lasting scar on everyone involved, a reminder of how quickly fear, confusion, and desperation can spiral into tragedy. What began as an ordinary day ended in heartbreak, captured forever on the quiet suburban porch of a family who only wanted to feel safe in their own home. On the 30th of June, 2024, a warm summer evening in Smith County, Texas, turned into a night of heartbreak and chaos. At about 6:30 in the evening, an armed man named Melvin Orlando Jr. was seen quietly watching a house from a distance. Inside, his former girlfriend, 21-year-old Tasha Castaneda, was attending a birthday dinner for another man named Kelly Torres. It should have been a simple, joyful night, but Melvin had other plans that would soon change everything. Inside the house, laughter and conversation filled the room, until a knock at the door brought everything to a sudden stop. When Kelly's family opened it, Melvin walked in holding a firearm. Within moments, the sound of panic replaced the laughter. Kelly was hit several times before Melvin fled the scene, leaving chaos and confusion behind. Police officers arrived minutes later, after receiving frantic emergency calls. They entered the home cautiously, unsure if the suspect was still nearby. As they moved through the rooms, They found Kelly lying on the floor, barely conscious. He had been struck 6 times in the upper body. His pulse was weak, almost impossible to detect.
Hey, do me a favor, just hold my flashlight right here, okay?
Yes.
S5 EMS is entering.
The officers immediately carried him outside to the waiting ambulance, hoping there was still time to save his life. As paramedics worked frantically to keep him alive, the officers turned their attention to the witnesses. They first spoke with Kelly's sister, Alondra Rosales, who described what had happened. She said Melvin burst in unexpectedly, confronted Tasha, and accused her of betraying him. When she told her mother to grab her child and hide, Melvin turned his anger on Kelly, asking Tasha questions like, "Do you love me?" before opening fire. It quickly became clear that Melvin had not come to talk. He had come looking for revenge. Tasha, sitting nearby in tears, told officers that she and Melvin had broken up just 5 weeks earlier, after a 6-year relationship. Since then, she said, he had become unpredictable, showing up at her job uninvited, sending disturbing messages, and threatening to harm himself. She had even turned off her phone's location settings, but somehow, he always seemed to find her. That night, Melvin had tracked her down again. Hearing her describe her fear, police realized how dangerous he truly was. A statewide alert was issued for his white pickup truck, and the manhunt began. Hours passed with no trace of him. It felt as if Melvin had disappeared completely. But around 11 that night, officers received a tip that his truck had been spotted outside a home in the city. They surrounded the property and called out for him to surrender. The homeowner, the mother of Melvin's friend Mario, told officers he had been there earlier, but had left. Her answers seemed uncertain, and the police suspected she was hiding something. When they checked the property and nearby wooded areas, there was still no sign of Melvin. Just as officers began to think he might still be inside, another call came over the radio. Melvin and Mario were driving around in a different tan-colored truck. The woman had been telling the truth. Once again, the suspect had slipped through their fingers. For nearly an hour, police units combed the city streets, following leads and checking every tan truck they could find. At one point, officers came across an overturned vehicle that matched the description, but it turned out not to be his. The tension kept building as the night wore on. Then finally, around 1 in the morning, an officer spotted a pickup that matched Melvin's. When they confirmed he was inside, multiple patrol units surrounded the vehicle on Southeast Loop 321 Officers ordered both men out of the truck. Melvin stepped out slowly, his hands raised, before being handcuffed and taken into custody. His friend Mario followed quietly. Both were taken to the police station, where detectives began their questioning. During the interrogation, Melvin at first refused to say much. He mumbled short answers and avoided eye contact. But as detectives gently steered the conversation toward Tasha, he began to open up. He admitted that he had been drinking heavily that night and had tracked her location through her vehicle's app. He said he didn't know what he was going to do when he arrived, just that he felt angry, jealous, and confused. When asked if he intended to hurt anyone, Melvin claimed he had been acting in the heat of the moment, saying he didn't even know how many times he had fired. But the evidence painted a different story. 6 shots, all aimed, showed intent rather than impulse. He told detectives he had been struggling to move on after the breakup, working long hours and barely sleeping, while Tasha seemed ready to start a new chapter without him. His jealousy and inability to let go consumed him until it finally exploded in violence. Back at the hospital, doctors fought to save Kelly's life, but his injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead that night, never making it home from what was supposed to be his 22nd birthday celebration. Mario, who had been with Melvin that evening, was released after investigators confirmed he had only been trying to calm his friend down. Melvin, however, faced serious charges. On the 30th of June, 2024, he was officially charged with murder and held on $500,000 bail. Months later, on the 2nd of February, 2025, after a 2-day trial, Melvin was found guilty of capital murder. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. What began as a case of heartbreak spiraled into tragedy, one driven by obsession, jealousy, and a refusal to let go. The night that should have been filled with celebration instead became a reminder of how quickly love can turn dangerous when it crosses into control. For Tasha, that summer evening would remain etched in her memory forever. A night when a man's obsession took away an innocent life and shattered several others in the process. On the 16th of December, 2019, a quiet evening in Morristown, New Jersey, turned into a night of unimaginable horror for 38-year-old Kelly Sutliff. Just 11 months into her marriage with Chris Mackey, the man she believed was the love of her life, Kelly found herself fighting for survival inside her own home. What started as a normal night quickly spiraled into a terrifying ordeal that would expose a dark truth she could have never imagined. The first sign of trouble came with a call to emergency services. The dispatcher's calm voice asked for an address, but Kelly's trembling response was, "Everything's okay," followed by silence. Moments later, another call came in, this time from a neighbor, reporting that a woman had come banging on their door, badly hurt and terrified.
We need an ambulance and cops. My neighbor across the street just came banging on my door.
Is she hurt?
She's hurt very bad.
When officers arrived, they found chaos everywhere. The house looked like a war zone. Tables were overturned. The television was ripped from the wall, and glass littered the floor. Through the front window, they saw a man completely unclothed and covered in blood, wandering aimlessly before vanishing downstairs.
And I see this naked guy walking inside, going downstairs.
Officers forced their way inside, only to find Chris Mackey, incoherent, refusing follow commands. They tackled and arrested him, but what they discovered inside the house was unlike anything they had ever seen. The bedroom was destroyed, and there were signs of a violent struggle. Yet, the woman who made the first emergency call was nowhere to be found. Moments later, police learned that Kelly had managed to flee the home and take shelter with a neighbor, shaking uncontrollably and pleading for help. Kelly, a psychotherapist with a stable life and career, had met Chris just 15 months earlier through an online dating app. Their connection had been instant. He appeared thoughtful, kind, and attentive. Everything she had ever wanted. Within 3 months of meeting, they got engaged, and by January of 2019, they were married. At first, life with Chris seemed perfect. He doted on her, brought her meals, and constantly reassured her of his love. But that perfect image soon began to crumble. Kelly started to experience strange health problems. She developed persistent rashes, headaches, and severe fatigue. Doctors couldn't determine what was wrong.
I was getting some rashes, headaches. The hives got 10 times worse. I was tired all of the time.
And Chris appeared to be her biggest support, always bringing her water, food, and medication. But as her illness worsened, his behavior began to change. He grew controlling, demanding, and often used emotional manipulation to pressure her into doing things she was uncomfortable with. Still, Kelly tried to hold the marriage together. That changed on the night of December 15th, 2019, when she followed a sudden instinct to check Chris's phone. What she found left her frozen in disbelief. Hundreds of explicit messages between Chris and another woman, filled with insults about Kelly. He mocked her, called her names, and claimed he no longer loved her. When she confronted him, his expression went cold. Without saying a word, he walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower. Then, things took a terrifying turn. From the bathroom, Chris called Kelly's best friend and told her that Kelly was unstable and might harm herself. Moments later, he attempted to access Kelly's locked gun safe. When that failed, he charged down the stairs, covered in water, his eyes wide with rage. "Thanks for always watching crime shows," he said coldly. "Now I'm gonna make this look like you tried to hurt me." Before Kelly could react, Chris began cutting himself and spreading his blood on her and around the room. He destroyed furniture and walls, throwing her against the sheetrock so hard that her head went through it. "See what I can do," he said with a chilling smirk. He wanted to stage the perfect crime scene to make it appear that Kelly had attacked him, and he acted in self-defense. Throughout the assault, Chris held a knife to Kelly's throat and strangled her multiple times until she blacked out. He even threatened her beloved dog, Chester. But by some miracle, Kelly escaped to the basement, found her dog alive, and managed to reach a neighbor's house for help. When police secured the scene, Kelly returned to gather her things and discovered Chris's phone. What she found next was even more horrifying than the attack itself. The phone contained hundreds of photos of her while she was asleep, images and videos she had no memory of. In one clip, she appeared unconscious while Chris violated her. In another, he smiled at the camera as he leaned over her. That was when Kelly realized the awful truth. Chris had been drugging her for months. The strange symptoms she had been experiencing, fatigue, rashes, dizziness, were not from illness, but from substances Chris had been slipping into her drinks. Investigators later discovered medications in his belongings, typically used for treating breast cancer, drugs known to cause the same side effects Kelly had endured. Chris was arrested for aggravated assault and strangulation, but under New Jersey law, as a first-time offender, he was released shortly after. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the legal system's hands were tied. To make matters worse, authorities were forced to return Chris's phone before securing a search warrant. By the time they received permission to examine it again, all incriminating evidence had been deleted. Kelly filed additional charges, but prosecutors claimed there still wasn't enough to convict him of his more severe crimes. Chris, meanwhile, began sending her voicemails and letters, acting as though nothing had happened. He even had her legally red flagged, which led police to confiscate her firearms, leaving her more vulnerable than ever. Determined to protect herself, Kelly hired a private investigator. What she learned next shattered her even more. Chris had been married 3 times before, and each of his ex-wives had reported similar disturbing behavior, though none wanted to relive their trauma publicly. One ex even revealed that Chris's Wi-Fi password was the date he assaulted Kelly. After years of legal battles, in October 2022, Chris finally accepted a plea deal. Instead of prison, he received only 3 years of probation. For Kelly, it felt like another betrayal, this time by the system meant to protect her. She later said that the entire ordeal felt like being victimized all over again. Despite the heartbreak, she chose to keep speaking out, determined to make sure that no one else would ever fall into the same nightmare she did. The story of Kelly Sutliff became not only a tale of survival, but also a painful reminder of how love can sometimes disguise the darkest kind of evil. On the 27th of December, 2019, a quiet neighborhood in Pflugerville, Texas, became the center of a tragedy that seemed to defy reason. That morning, 25-year-old Michael Aguagu, a former college football player, arrived at his sister Jennifer's home. He had come to spend the holidays with her and her family. To everyone who knew him, Michael was calm, kind, and deeply spiritual. But over the next 24 hours, something changed. Jennifer began to notice strange behavior from her brother. He was pacing, mumbling prayers, and talking about spirits and redemption.
I am so sorry. Okay, it's still me. What the God, that was crazy. Get out of my head.
Concerned, she sent a message to her friend Linda, asking her to come over. When Linda arrived, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. Michael appeared distant, almost detached from reality. Then, in a moment of horror, he emerged from the house, holding Jennifer's 2-year-old child. Linda would later recall that he was smiling as he softly confessed to something unimaginable. Panicked, Linda called 911. Her voice trembled as she told the dispatcher that Jennifer had been hurt. There was blood everywhere. Inside the home, Jennifer's other brother, Martin, had just arrived after receiving a text message from her. He rushed in, desperately searching for his siblings while his wife waited outside with the children. Within moments, he carried Jennifer's infant to safety, unaware that his sister's condition was already beyond help. Outside, neighbors were calling the police as well. They saw a man, shirtless and covered in blood, walking in the street. One witness described how he began removing his clothes completely, shouting phrases about faith and deliverance. Officers from the Travis County Sheriff's Department arrived within minutes and found Michael kneeling naked in the roadway. They approached cautiously, commanding him to lie on his stomach. He obeyed without resistance, repeating religious phrases as he was taken into custody.
Lay on your face. Lay on your face. Put your hands behind your back.
Inside the house, first responders tried everything to save Jennifer, but it was too late. The scene they encountered was overwhelming, with one deputy describing it as something that could only be called a bloodletting. Both Jennifer and her unborn child were gone. The tragedy left investigators and family members struggling to understand what could have caused such a sudden, catastrophic break from reality. Michael's red-stained clothes were found in a recycling bin, outside, next to a silver kitchen knife. When questioned, his answers were disjointed and filled with religious references. He spoke of serpents, redemption, and light. Officers gently asked if he had taken any substances, but tests later confirmed he had not been under the influence of drugs or alcohol. As the investigation unfolded, Michael's family began piecing together what had happened. In the days leading up to the attack, his stepfather recalled that Michael had been staying with him at an Airbnb over the holidays. The night before the incident, he woke to find Michael sweating and murmuring prayers, speaking about angels and the struggle between good and evil. He seemed to believe he was caught in a battle for his soul. In the hours before the tragedy, Michael's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He wept while listening to gospel music and begged for deliverance, saying things like, "Get out of me, serpent," and "Let there be light." Jennifer and their mother had prayed over him for hours, even performing what they described as a small baptism in hopes of calming him. Jennifer texted Linda that Michael was manifesting, a word she used to describe what she believed was a spiritual possession. Minutes later, she sent another message to her twin brother Martin, saying simply, "Michael is acting out. Michael needs you." When Martin and Linda arrived, the scene they walked into would change their lives forever. In the days after his arrest, Michael's words became even more alarming. He referred to himself as Michael the Archangel, claiming he had been chosen for a divine purpose. His former roommate told investigators that this obsession had begun years earlier, around the time Michael's dreams of joining the National Football League had fallen apart. He had started speaking about seeing energy, hearing voices, and feeling as though he was being watched. At first, his friends thought he was just struggling with stress, but his thoughts soon became darker and more confused. During interviews with detectives, Michael continued to speak in fragmented prayers and phrases, often alternating between calm reflection and sudden intensity. At times he seemed genuinely terrified, pleading for forgiveness and asking others to get the demon out of me. Despite his state, his family stood by him, believing he was not in control of his actions that day. Jennifer's husband, who was overseas in Nigeria when the tragedy occurred, was notified by authorities soon after. Their 2 young children were placed in the care of relatives until his return. An autopsy later confirmed that Jennifer, 32 years old, had been in her first trimester of pregnancy. The report listed multiple stab wounds as the cause of death. Michael was charged with first-degree murder and held on a $500,000 bond. Over the next several months, mental health evaluations painted a picture of severe psychosis, and in July of 2020, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. He was committed to a state psychiatric facility for long-term treatment. For the next 5 years, Michael remained under psychiatric care, with periodic reviews of his mental condition. In March of 2025, a judge approved his conditional release, meaning he would continue receiving treatment while living under strict supervision. It was a decision that divided many, especially those still haunted by the events of that winter afternoon. What happened inside that quiet Texas home remains one of the most unsettling cases ever connected to YouTube's rabbit holes of real-life tragedies. A story that began with faith and ended in heartbreak left behind only questions, grief, and a reminder of how fragile the human mind can be when pushed beyond its limits. It was a quiet Monday morning on the 13th of June, 2022, when a 911 call broke the silence in Round Lake, Illinois. Debbie Carrolls had just arrived at her ex-husband's home to pick up her 3 children, Bryant, Cassidy, and Gideon. She had done this countless times before, but this time, what she walked into would change her life forever. The moment she stepped into the bedroom, her world fell apart. Her children were lying still on the bed, pale and cold, their little hands motionless, in shock and disbelief. Debbie called 911, her voice trembling as she struggled to find the words. She told the dispatcher that her husband had hurt the kids, that she had found them lifeless in bed.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
I came home to take the kids, and they're all on the bed, and they're...
When asked how it happened, she said she didn't know. Maybe he suffocated them. Maybe he used something, she wasn't sure. Only that they were gone. By the time police officers arrived, the house was eerily silent. Jason Carroll's, her ex-husband, was nowhere to be found. His red Nissan Maxima was missing. As investigators searched through the home, they discovered a blood-stained knife and a razor blade in the kitchen. But surprisingly, there were no stab wounds on the children. Instead, there were faint marks around their necks, and their lips and fingertips had turned blue. The cause was clear. They had been choked. Officers soon noticed a trail of blood leading from the bedroom to the kitchen. There, on a table marked with smudges of red, they found a handwritten letter from Jason. The writing was unsteady, filled with crossed-out lines and emotional confessions. He wrote about the past 7 years of marriage, how love had turned into resentment, how court battles had drained him, and how he couldn't stand the idea of losing his family. He blamed Debbie for leaving, for taking the kids, and for moving on. Then came a chilling line that would stay with every officer who read it. "If I can't have them, neither can you." Another message scribbled on a whiteboard nearby said, "I'm sorry. I love them too much to leave them behind. You promised. You swore. You lied." These words painted a heartbreaking picture of a man whose anger had consumed him completely. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was planned. A statewide alert went out for Jason's car. Within hours, a state trooper spotted the red Maxima speeding down a highway. When officers tried to pull him over, Jason refused to stop. A high-speed chase followed, with multiple police vehicles and even a helicopter pursuing him. He swerved dangerously through traffic, trying to escape, until his car finally crashed on the shoulder of the road. The wreck was severe, but Jason survived. Officers rushed to the scene, ordering him to show his hands. His voice was weak as he said, "I know I messed up. I thought I was saving them." His words sent chills through everyone there. He was pulled from the car with injuries and rushed to the hospital. Later, detectives sat beside his hospital bed and asked him the question that everyone wanted answered. Why did he do it? Jason said he felt betrayed. He claimed Debbie had cheated on him, kept the kids from him, and that he didn't want his children to grow up in pain. He said he thought he was saving them from a broken home, but his reasoning made no sense to anyone. Jason also told investigators that he had written letters before everything happened. He said that Debbie had once sworn on the children's lives during an argument, and in his mind, when she lied afterward, he took it as a sign that they belonged with him. His thinking had become twisted beyond comprehension. While Jason was being treated, Debbie was in another room at the police station, still in shock. She didn't yet know that he had been caught. When an officer gently told her, "He did it. He hurt your children, but he's in custody now," she collapsed in tears. Through sobs, she described how she found them, how she saw the blood in the garage, how she ran upstairs praying she was wrong, only to face the unimaginable truth. In the months that followed, investigators pieced together the timeline of that morning. Jason had spent days planning what he would do. He left behind notes, messages, and evidence that showed he wanted to take his own life afterward. But when the crash didn't end him, he faced the full weight of what he had done. In February of 2024, Jason Carroll stood before a judge. His lawyers entered a plea of guilty, but mentally ill. He admitted to taking the lives of his 3 children, claiming he wasn't in the right state of mind. The court, however, was firm. Jason was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. He would receive mental health treatment behind bars, but he would never again walk free. Debbie, left with unimaginable grief, created a fundraiser to cover the funeral and legal expenses. The community rallied around her, raising over $70,000. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers offered support. But the pain she carried was something no one could truly understand. Since that tragic day, Debbie has stayed away from the spotlight. She has focused on healing quietly, surrounded by family and those who love her. She rarely speaks about what happened, but those close to her say she's been trying to rebuild her life, one day at a time. The story of the Carrolls family serves as a painful reminder of how anger and loss, left unchecked, can spiral into tragedy. A once happy home was torn apart, leaving behind only memories of 3 innocent lives, and a mother who will carry their love forever. On that quiet Monday morning in June 2022, the silence of Round Lake was broken by a call for help that no one would ever forget. a call that marked the end of a family and the beginning of a lifelong heartbreak. And that brings us to the end of this episode. If you found this video informative, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what we drop next. We cover stories like this almost every day, and trust me, you don't want to be left behind. If you can't wait until the next upload, there are more videos popping up on your screen in just a few seconds. Click one and keep watching. Until then, take care. I'm